He's being accused of rape, not in a criminal court, not by the police, not by a DA, but by a woman in a civil lawsuit against him.
For over 3 decades, Garth Brooks was not only recognized as the leading star of American country music, but also regarded as the ideal image of a devoted husband within the entertainment industry. A voice etched into music history, a flawless icon, a name the public trusted without question. But now that very name no longer echoes beneath the stage lights. It surfaces instead in a courtroom not tied to a new chart-topping hit, but documented in criminal records accompanied by shocking allegations, physical assault, psychological manipulation, and abuse of power over subordinates. Brooks didn't remain silent. He spoke out. He filed a countersuit. He claimed he was the victim of a blackmail conspiracy. Yet as the chain of evidence was presented, Garth Brooks seemed to crumble right there in the courtroom in front of hundreds of stunned onlookers. What could possibly bring down someone once seen as untouchable in just a few minutes of confronting hard proof? Did what was exposed shake him? Someone who had always asserted his innocence to the point of collapse. And that fall, was it the heartbreaking downfall of a man wrongly accused? Or the final moment when decades of carefully crafted morality were shattered by the truth? Are you truly ready to face the reality behind this historic downfall? Part 1. A glorious career before the storm. Before the shocking allegations came to light, Garth Brooks was not merely a superstar singer. He was a defining cultural icon of America. Born in 1962 in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Brooks entered the country music scene in the late 1980s and quickly brought a fresh, transformative energy that reshaped the entire genre. With his high-octane stage presence and emotionally rich storytelling songs, blending elements of country pop and rock, he propelled country music beyond the southern U.S. and into the hearts of music lovers around the world. In 1990, his album No Fences skyrocketed to the top of the Billboard charts. And from that moment, Brooks's career trajectory only moved upward. By 2024, according to the Recording Industry Association of America, RIAA, he had sold over 157 million albums in the US alone, ranking second only to the Beatles and surpassing Elvis Presley. Brooks wasn't just a performer, he was a storyteller with a magnetic pull. Songs like The Dance Friends in Low Places and If Tomorrow Never Comes were not just hit singles. They became deeply embedded in the collective memory of millions of Americans. On tour, Brooks made a concerted effort to bridge the gap between artist and audience. He often left the stage to immerse himself in the crowd, shaking hands with fans and sharing deeply personal, heartfelt stories. The image of him standing center stage, reaching out to tens of thousands of people singing in unison, became a symbol of genuine connection between the performer and the public. For this reason, his collapse in court was not only a legal shock, but also an emotional gut punch for the millions who had long admired him. A significant part of Brooks's pristine image also stemmed from a personal life that was nearly scandal-free. His marriage to fellow singer Trisha Yearwood was often portrayed in the media as a Hollywood ideal. The two frequently performed together on stage, exchanged tender glances, and made public appearances that radiated warmth and approachability. In numerous interviews, Brooks consistently emphasized that family was his top priority. He even took a break from his career from 2001 to 2005 to focus fully on raising his children, to fans and the media alike. Brooks wasn't just a gifted artist, he was also a devoted husband, a responsible father, and a man of integrity. That's why when he collapsed in court after allegations of sexual misconduct were formally presented, it wasn't just a legal reckoning. It marked the dramatic unraveling of a moral role model whose spotless reputation had been carefully upheld for over 3 decades. What's more, even as he entered his 60s, Brooks remained relentlessly dedicated to music. Since 2021, he had launched a residency show at Caesars Palace in Las Vegas, a format regarded as a prestigious milestone reserved for industry legends. With more than 60 performances at the Coliseum, Brooks drew not only large crowds of middle-aged fans who had followed him since the 1990s, but also managed to win over a new generation of younger concert-goers. According to data from Billboard Box Score, each show averaged over 4,000 attendees, with ticket prices ranging from $95 to $350, a clear testament to his enduring appeal. Beyond the stage, Brooks also made bold moves in music distribution. He was one of the few major artists who refused to release his music on Spotify or Apple Music, instead opting for an exclusive partnership with Amazon Music. This strategy allowed him to maintain maximum control over his work, while also protecting the value of his personal brand and ensuring consistent revenue. In various interviews, Brooks emphasized that his success wasn't the result of gimmicks, but rather the product of persistence and unwavering loyalty to his fans. Ironically, it was this tightly controlled image that made the lawsuit from Jane Roe, a former makeup artist who had worked with both Brooks and his wife, all the more staggering. For a man who had crafted a persona as a devoted husband and a revered father, being embroiled in accusations of sexual misconduct was almost unimaginable. And when he physically collapsed in the courtroom as the initial pieces of evidence were revealed, public perception began to shift from sympathy to suspicion, mixed with a sense of heartbreak over a legend who may have single-handedly destroyed what he had spent decades building. Although the court had yet to deliver a final verdict at the time, the image of Brooks crumbling in the courtroom became emblematic, a symbolic end to his golden era, and the beginning of a new, uncertain chapter. As people look back on the dazzling journey he once traveled, many are left to wonder, is this truly the end of a legend, or merely the beginning of a never-ending crisis of reputation? Part 2. Lawsuit from a former employee. No one could have predicted that the person who would bring Garth Brooks down from his pedestal would be a quiet figure working behind the scenes. Jane Roe, a makeup artist who had worked for Brooks and his wife for many years, although she was neither a public figure nor someone with a voice in the media, Jane Roe emerged as the plaintiff in a detailed lawsuit accusing Brooks of physical harassment, psychological manipulation, and long-term exploitation of her financial hardship. The lawsuit was filed with the Los Angeles County Superior Court in early 2025, with legal support from Wigdor LLP, a law firm known for representing numerous high-profile victims in landmark Me Too cases. Notably, throughout the court documents, Jane Roe opted to use a pseudonym, clearly signaling her desire to keep her identity confidential, to avoid media scrutiny and public pressure. The complaint spanned over 50 pages in which Jane Roe recounted a series of incidents that occurred between 2017 and 2020, a period during which she worked closely with both Garth Brooks and Trisha Yearwood on music events, television programs, and concert tours. According to the statements in the filing, a turning point occurred in 2019 when she was invited to Brooks's private residence to provide makeup services for a filming session. What seemed like a regular morning took a shocking turn when Brooks suddenly emerged from the bathroom completely naked, approaching her with obvious excitement. The most disturbing part was that he grabbed her hand, pulled her close to his body, and made suggestive remarks indicating that he had fantasized about this moment for a long time. Despite clearly rejecting him, Jane Roe continued her work out of fear of losing her only source of income. At the time, she was in a severe financial crisis and couldn't afford to quit. Another incident mentioned in the lawsuit took place in May 2019 during a work trip to Los Angeles with Brooks. At their accommodation, Roe discovered that Brooks had booked only one suite. Unlike previous trips, there was no separate room reserved for her. That evening, he appeared at her door, completely naked, confidently showing off his body and inviting her to join in. She described feeling terrified, cornered, and entirely powerless both mentally and physically. The lawsuit also described Brooks's physique, over 6 feet tall and weighing nearly 300 pounds, as a stark contrast to her petite frame, which was under 100 pounds. The most severe incident reportedly occurred when Brooks allegedly used force to restrain her on a hotel bed and sexually assaulted her despite her resistance. In the complaint, his actions were described as violent and out of control. He was said to have pinned her down with his leg and forced her to wear glasses throughout the ordeal so he could clearly see the fear in her eyes. Following the incident, Jane Roe was still required to continue her duties doing Brooks's hair and makeup for his performance at the Grammy Awards the next day. This detail underscored the ruthless and absolute abuse of power. In addition to the physical assaults, Jane Roe also accused Brooks of ongoing psychological manipulation. According to the filing while she worked, he frequently shared personal fantasies and even suggested she join an open relationship between him and his wife, claiming Trisha Yearwood would be open to it. Her refusals were met with sulking, long silences or subtle threats, all contributing to relentless emotional pressure. A crucial part of the complaint included medical evidence provided by Jane Roe. She had sought medical attention for injuries to her back, neck, and knees, consistent with her account of the hotel incident. Additionally, psychological reports indicated she suffered from severe depression and had even contemplated suicide following the traumatic experiences. Her attorney stated that this was not merely a case of harassment, but a textbook example of grooming, a calculated effort to control and exploit a vulnerable victim over an extended period. Furthermore, Jane Roe submitted audio recordings of conversations between her and Brooks. In one 2020 recording, Brooks was said to have admitted that something happened, and when Jane Roe expressed that she was afraid of him, he responded with only a brief apology. In another recording, when she set clear boundaries, he likened his actions to breaking into a store and regretting it, but hoping no one finds out. Legal experts have commented that the language used in the complaint deviates from typical legal tone. It is rich with imagery, personal details, and specific emotions, not just aiming to persuade the court, but also to shape public opinion. Jane Roe's legal team appears to have adopted a dual strategy, using the law to protect the victim, while also leveraging media influence to put pressure on Brooks, who has long maintained a positive public image. Immediately after the lawsuit was filed, Garth Brooks responded harshly, claiming it was an outright extortion scheme. However, his next move, filing a countersuit in Mississippi to block the original claim, sparked widespread suspicion about his true intentions. Jane Roe's attorney described the countersuit as both cowardly and desperate, clearly aimed at delaying proceedings or nullifying the allegations. It's important to note that as of now, Garth Brooks has not issued any detailed response to the specific allegations in the lawsuit. He has avoided the media, made only brief appearances at a few performances, and issued broad denials of any wrongdoing. It appears he is carefully maneuvering to evade accountability, but will he ultimately escape the truth? Stay tuned to the video for the answer. Part 3. Garth Brooks' counter strategy. As soon as the first allegation was made public, Garth Brooks and his legal team chose not to remain silent or seek a settlement as many other artists had done in similar lawsuits. Instead, Brooks opted to confront the matter head-on. He denied all accusations, claimed he was the target of a blackmail scheme, and launched a fierce counteroffensive both legally and through the media, a move that many experts described as bold but equally risky. Brooks's first public statement came in the form of a press release in mid-January 2025, just days after Jane Roe's lawsuit began to receive widespread media attention. In the carefully worded message, Brooks expressed being deeply shocked by the accusations, which he called entirely false, and insisted that the lawsuit was part of an organized effort to exert financial pressure and damage his reputation. He firmly refused to apologize or admit to any wrongdoing, emphasizing that paying a settlement would only make people believe he was guilty, something he said he would never accept. Shortly afterward, an unexpected development occurred. Brooks's legal team filed a countersuit in the federal court of Mississippi, where he currently resides. In this filing, Brooks's team requested the court to block Jane Roe from continuing the lawsuit in California, and asserted that all interactions between the two parties had been consensual, lawful, and non-coercive. This was an unusual move in the entertainment industry, where public figures facing sensitive civil or criminal allegations rarely take such steps. So much so that many legal experts described it as a high-stakes gamble in the legal arena. However, instead of projecting confidence and decisiveness, the move sparked public suspicion. Some experts believed Brooks' choice of Mississippi, a state known for its more conservative legal system, was not a coincidence but a strategy to seek a more favorable ruling. Still, from a public relations perspective, the move backfired, with many perceiving it as an attempt to avoid a more rigorous legal process in California. Not long after, Jane Roe's legal team issued a strong response. They held a press conference, shared additional information about the victim's mental state, and accused Brooks of intentionally revealing her identity in legal documents as a form of retaliation. This incident quickly ignited debate over how to protect the privacy of victims in sensitive lawsuits. A standout feature of Brooks's defense strategy was the close coordination between his legal team and media handlers. The lawyers he hired were high-profile figures known for handling complex cases involving celebrities and media scrutiny. At the same time, Brooks brought in a powerful PR team, including former journalists from CNN and NBC. They crafted a phased media response strategy, beginning with outright denial, shifting to casting doubt on the accuser's motives, and ultimately attempting to frame the entire lawsuit as an attack on the reputation of an artist. Media outlets friendly to Brooks continuously aired programs challenging Jane Roe's claims. Some experts brought in to speak on his behalf suggested the evidence seemed prearranged and claimed the language in the complaint hinted at a media agenda, implying the entire situation was orchestrated. Notably, several newspapers began probing into Jane Roe's personal life, highlighting unpaid debts and frequent job changes in an effort to question her character and credibility. While this is a common tactic in high-profile lawsuits, it has also drawn fierce criticism for promoting a blame-the-victim mentality. Meanwhile, Brooks tried to maintain his image as a devoted family man during the initial storm. Trisha Yearwood, his wife, did not issue any public statements but posted a photo of the two standing together on stage with the caption, "Love one another," and the hashtag #Thiagnus, widely interpreted as a subtle show of support. According to US Weekly, Brooks' 3 daughters fully supported their father. This was part of a broader effort to preserve his moral image, using the family as a media shield in the eye of the storm. Nonetheless, no matter how well structured his counteroffensive may have been, it could not overcome one major obstacle: the impending release of physical evidence prepared by the plaintiff. The more vehemently Brooks denied the allegations, the more the public grew eager to see definitive proof, and the pressure reached its peak in early March 2025, when the court announced it would review a set of new documents submitted by the plaintiff's attorneys. These included audio recordings, screenshots of text messages, and medical records. For the first time in the legal process, Brooks was required to appear in court in person, rather than being represented solely by his lawyers. The March 12th hearing became an irreversible turning point, when the evidence was presented, including a short audio clip featuring a male voice identified as Brooks, admitting that something happened. The courtroom fell utterly silent. Media reports described Brooks sitting motionless, hands tightly clasped, saying nothing. When a copy of text messages containing heart emojis and suggestive language appeared on the screen, he began to tremble. Just as the judge called for order, Brooks suddenly collapsed, falling from his chair and hitting his shoulder hard on the courtroom floor in front of hundreds of onlookers. CNN captured the moment, and it quickly went viral on social media. A brand crisis management expert remarked, "That was the moment Garth Brooks lost control, not just of his body, but of the entire legal media and image strategy he had painstakingly built." His silence after the collapse only deepened public curiosity. People began to wonder if what they had just witnessed was the truth. Following the hearing, Brooks's legal team announced that he needed rest and medical care due to emotional stress and would temporarily suspend all artistic activities. However, from an analytical perspective, this was more than a health issue. It reflected the reality that his defense strategy had reached its limits. His efforts to discredit the allegations were no longer convincing to the public, and sympathy had begun to shift toward the accuser. Experts called it the turning point of the entire lawsuit, the moment when every legal calculation had to change. And then everything changed entirely on March 12, 2025, when the plaintiff's side presented physical evidence for the first time, including a verified audio recording images and messages that indirectly suggested an admission from Brooks. In that exact moment, the courtroom held its breath, awaiting Garth Brooks's reaction. Part 4. Evidence revealed. On March 12, 2025, at the Los Angeles court, the U.S. media referred to this as the toughest trial in the legal career of an artist since the Weinstein scandal. The atmosphere in the courtroom had been tense since the early morning. Garth Brooks's legal team was fully present, accompanied by 2 media assistants and a representative from his former record label. On the plaintiff's side, Jane Roe was supported by 3 lawyers from Wigdor LLP, a well-known firm specializing in handling cases of bodily assault, which had represented many figures from the Me Too movement. Garth Brooks entered the court at exactly 8:57 a.m. using the special entrance reserved for high-profile defendants. Dressed in a gray suit, he wore a stiff expression, his eyes lost in thought. Unlike his usual confident demeanor, Brooks avoided eye contact with everyone, even his wife, Trisha Yearwood, who sat in the front row silently and expressionless. What everyone was waiting for at that moment was not words, but evidence. The evidence that would decide the turning point of the lawsuit and perhaps the 30-year-long career of a music legend. At the start of the trial, the judge warned both parties, today's trial will focus on assessing physical evidence. If there is any disruptive or disorderly conduct, I will immediately ask the person to leave the courtroom. This warning was not unnecessary, as what was about to unfold would completely alter all previous predictions. The plaintiff's lawyer began presenting evidence with a clear, structured slideshow. The first piece was a copy of messages between Jane Roe and a phone number registered under a fake name, but through IP tracing, it was determined to belong to Garth Brooks. In these messages, the sender used adult language accompanied by heart kiss and other emojis with lines such as, "I can't stop thinking about you with those glasses. Do you remember that night?" Or, "I've never felt anything this natural, even with Trisha." According to the plaintiff's lawyer, this string of messages lasted from May to September 2019, coinciding with the time Jane Roe described being assaulted in Los Angeles. Next came evidence from a recorded conversation, which silenced the entire courtroom. The 4-minute, 26-second recording was made by Jane Roe, using a small device in her jacket pocket while the two were talking backstage at a Phoenix concert. In the recording, Jane asks, "Did you tell Trisha that you saw me not wearing anything that night?" The male voice in the recording, identified through audio analysis as Garth Brooks, replies, "No, but she wouldn't mind. You know it's just a moment, right? It'll pass." When Jane says she felt scared, the male voice responds, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you feel that way. But it happened." The entire courtroom fell silent. Brooks sat motionless, holding his head in his hands, his eyes tightly shut. The media captured images of him shaking slightly, his shoulders tensed, sweat clearly visible on his face. But the shock didn't end there. The next piece of evidence was medical records, a 12-page document detailing Jane Roe's visits to a clinic in Los Angeles describing injuries to her neck, knee, and lower back. The attending doctor, according to the attached testimony, confirmed that these injuries were consistent with the patient's description of being held down and forced backward. The document also noted signs of post-traumatic stress and that she had been referred to a psychologist since June 2019. When the plaintiff's lawyer presented a surveillance image from the 2019 Grammy Awards backstage showing Garth Brooks and Jane Roe entering a hotel at 10:47 p.m., but only one room was scanned with a keycard. Brooks suddenly collapsed on the floor. There were no screams, no words, just a sudden fall as if his body had no strength to resist. According to testimony from a reporter present at the scene, Brooks fell to the left, his left shoulder slamming against the hard wooden floor, his elbow unable to brace the fall. Medical personnel were immediately called. The trial had to be paused for nearly 25 minutes. The media immediately broadcasted this footage. CNN cut into a financial program to report the news, while the New York Times posted a picture of him lying on a stretcher, his hand covering his face with the headline, "Country Music Legend Collapses in Court," a collapse of both physical and public image. Twitter exploded with over 400,000 mentions in just 12 hours with the hashtag #GarthBrooks, collapsed quickly, trending across the US. Legally, the collapse moment had no bearing on proving guilt, but in terms of media and public perception, it marked an irreversible turning point. Brooks, who had once controlled the narrative in refuting accusations, had now become a symbol of downfall. The media relentlessly asked, was it panic, a psychological shock, or just a sign that all his defenses had crumbled? Psychological analysts proposed several theories. A specialist from UCLA commented, Brooks's body may have reacted as a way to escape reality, especially when facing a truth he had been denying for months. Another opinion from the media was that the fall was the perfect image of a legend who once seemed untouchable, now exposed as just another human, flawed, weak, and vulnerable. Ironically, that moment became more deeply etched in the public's mind than any evidence. Those who had once supported Brooks began to question if he were truly innocent. Why did he react like that? The silence following his fall only heightened the doubt. Meanwhile, the plaintiff's side made no further comments, issuing a brief statement. The truth may take some time to reveal, but once it does, no one can deny it. After being discharged from the hospital in stable condition the next day, Brooks did not appear in public for the next 2 weeks. His performance schedule at Caesar's Palace was suddenly canceled, advertising contracts were suspended, and from there the lawsuit entered a new phase, where both justice and public opinion began to tilt in favor of the one who had once been considered the suspect. Part 5. Public Reaction. The sudden fall of Garth Brooks in court not only interrupted the trial, but also caused a stir in public opinion, especially among country music fans who have always regarded him as a steadfast icon. In the following days, social media became a battleground for a heated debate between two opposing sides, one that remained firmly supportive of Brooks, citing the principle of innocent until proven guilty, while the other began to turn away, placing their trust in the evidence and the voices of the victims. Brooks's loyal fans, particularly the older audience who have followed him since the 90s, reacted with conflicting emotions. "I heard him sing at my wedding now, I don't know how I feel," wrote a 57-year-old from Texas on Facebook. "If everything they say is true, I can't forgive him, but I also can't believe he'd be like that." Such sentiments were not uncommon. The doubt and sense of regret often felt when a cultural icon collapses, especially one tied to a generation, were clearly evident. In contrast, younger generations, those who primarily access information via TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram, showed a marked skepticism. Numerous posts analyzed Brooks's actions in court, interpreting them as a defensive psychological response to a bitter truth. A video clip capturing the moment he collapsed with the caption, "The moment truth breaks you," quickly garnered over 10 million views in less than 24 hours. The hashtag #BelieveJaneRoe spread rapidly across TikTok, becoming a wave of reaction against the defendant's attempts to dismiss the allegations. For this audience, Brooks's reaction in court was seen as a sign of confusion, even unspoken guilt. The media did not delay in joining the debate. Magazines that had once been Brooks's allies, such as People and Rolling Stone, began to change their approach. While they had previously used the term alleged, with caution terms like significant evidence and indirectly admitting recordings began to appear more frequently. The Atlantic published an article titled, "When the Legend Falls, Justice and the Weight of Fame," arguing that the image of an artist who was once the soul of country music is now the very reason victims had to suffer for years before speaking out. The impact of the event did not stop there as it spread to the brands and organizations collaborating with Brooks. Amazon Music, his music streaming platform, removed all promotional content featuring Brooks from its homepage shortly after the trial. A spokesperson for Amazon stated, We are reviewing all partnerships to ensure compliance with ethical and social standards. Check back. At the same time, some local country radio stations began to gradually reduce the number of times they played his songs, though no official ban was issued. In the entertainment industry, this was an early sign of what is known as cancel culture, the movement to boycott artists who were once celebrated on the family front. Trisha Yearwood, Brooks' wife who has always stood by him, remained notably silent. After the trial, she posted a black and white photo of intertwined hands on Instagram, accompanied by the caption, "Be kind because everyone is fighting a battle you can't see." Public opinion immediately split into two camps, one believing this was a message supporting her husband, while the other interpreting it as a sign that the family was beginning to fracture. Brooks's 3 daughters from previous marriages also remained silent. Sources close to the family revealed that they were shocked and gathering information from both sides. In the entertainment industry, most artists chose to stay out of the controversy. No colleagues publicly sided with Brooks, which was seen as unusual for someone once hailed as the big brother of country music. Big names like Reba McEntire and Keith Urban, who had previously worked with him, declined to comment on the lawsuit. This was not necessarily an act of condemnation, but it clearly indicated that Brooks was becoming increasingly isolated in a community where he was once revered. Some media experts raised the question, was the fall in court a genuine reaction or a deliberate move? Some argued that it was a sign of a psychological crisis, a physiological response to collapse. However, others doubted that it was just a final attempt by Brooks to regain public sympathy as the evidence was turning against him. Whether right or wrong, one thing is undeniable. The moment Garth Brooks collapsed before the media and public completely changed the way people viewed the case. What was once an uneven legal battle has now become a symbol of the struggle between fame and truth, between a glorious past and a grim reality. Part 6. The legal battle continues. After the dramatic fall in court, Garth Brooks disappeared from the public eye for several weeks, while fans continued to debate whether his emotional reaction was genuine or a staged move to attract media attention. The legal battle between both parties has become more intense than ever. In fact, the lawsuit has entered a new phase with strong legal maneuvers from both the plaintiff and the defendant. At this point, the case is no longer just about the relationship between a victim and a famous artist. It has turned into a double battle in the courtroom and in the media, where each side is utilizing every possible means to defend its position and image. The plaintiff, represented by the law firm Wigdor LLP, quickly moved to demand that Brooks be summoned back to court to provide direct testimony, citing existing evidence strong enough to proceed with questioning. They also filed a petition to the court requesting expedited handling of the case, emphasizing the importance of the defendant's testimony, now that credible audio recordings and messages had emerged. In response, Brooks's side filed for a delay, citing health issues following the courtroom incident, accompanied by a psychological expert's medical report, confirming that he was suffering from severe anxiety syndrome. This move was immediately questioned by legal experts and the media. Some specialists suggested that the claim of psychological issues could merely be a strategy to delay proceedings and give the defense team more time to restructure their defense strategy. Meanwhile, victim advocacy organizations warned that if the court accepted the delay on this basis without independent medical evidence, it would set a dangerous precedent, opening the door for influential figures to exploit legal loopholes to avoid facing justice. However, the battle is not confined to California. At the same time, Brooks has continued with his countersuit in Mississippi, citing protecting his personal reputation against slander and blackmail. Notably, during a preliminary hearing in Mississippi, Brooks's team unexpectedly submitted a series of personal emails exchanged between him and Jane Roe from 2018 to 2020. The content of these emails showed personal exchanges, sometimes friendly, sometimes work-related, but no clear signs of harassment. Brooks's legal team argued that this was evidence proving the relationship between the two was voluntary, with no coercion. Experts agree that this strategy is unlikely to succeed in a modern courtroom. Lawsuits involving bodily harm now not only consider physical behavior, but also account for power dynamics, social status, disparities, and psychological factors. In this case, Garth Brooks is a world-renowned artist while Jane Roe is just a contract employee financially dependent on him. The idea that their interactions were voluntary does not rule out the possibility of indirect control, especially when one party holds full authority in the profession. Meanwhile, the federal court has opened an internal investigation into Brooks' alleged disclosure of Jane Roe's true identity in legal documents, an action that violates the principle of protecting personal identities in sensitive cases. If intentional, Brooks could face financial penalties or be required to make reparations. This is a serious risk that his legal team cannot ignore. At this stage, the situation seems to have reached an impasse. One side holds emotionally compelling evidence, while the other possesses power and financial resources. However, according to legal experts, the chances of Brooks facing criminal charges are very low, as the alleged acts may have occurred beyond the statute of limitations for criminal prosecution, depending on the laws of each state. But civil lawsuits are a different matter. If the court rules that Brooks has committed misconduct, the damages could amount to tens of millions of dollars, not to mention the loss from his brand music sales and the long-term damage to his reputation. Another key question has been raised. Is this a landmark case similar to the Harvey Weinstein or Bill Cosby cases in the country music industry? Experts argue that if Brooks fails both legally and in the media, this case could pave the way for other victims to come forward, especially in an industry that has long been secretive and opaque like the American music industry. This not only threatens Brooks, but also forces major entertainment companies to reconsider their policies, control structures, and employee protection processes. In this context, Garth Brooks' decision to either continue denying or settle will be a strategic one. If he chooses to fight until the end, the risk of facing even more evidence is significant, including additional witnesses, supplementary testimonies, and even a request for a psychological evaluation in court. If he chooses to settle, he may preserve some of his reputation and avoid further public trials, but he would have to accept financial losses and an indirect admission of his mistakes. Whatever the choice it is, clear that Garth Brooks no longer holds the upper hand. Both fronts, the legal and the public, are currently tipping in favor of the plaintiff. And the fall in court, though over, remains a symbol of the shifting power dynamic from someone once untouchable to a defendant facing a legal and social storm from which it may be hard to escape. When Brooks fell to the floor during the court session on March 12th, the world seemed to hold its breath. But immediately after, there were no cheers. No one crying for him, only silence, as if everyone understood that the moment was no longer just about a particular man. It was the end. The end of believing that reputation equals morality. The end of expecting that heroes would never make mistakes. And the end of the illusion that the spotlight on stage could obscure the darkness beyond the lights. Perhaps Garth Brooks will return in some way. Maybe a belated appearance to explain himself or a public apology, or perhaps an attempt to make a comeback after years of silence. But no matter what, his legacy has changed forever. No longer about timeless love songs or dazzling performances, but a clear lesson about responsibility, power, and the cost of truth. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Below this video, do you think Garth Brooks is innocent, or is he hiding something? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel to follow the latest updates on this case that is shaking the entire United States. See you in the next video.